Hello, this is Ryan Shaw from the Society for Music Teacher Education Policy, ASPA, with an e-kit on standards. Standards have existed in various forms since the beginning of schooling, ever since teachers working in one-room schoolhouses needed ways to describe what students at various levels should know and be able to do. We can see the same effort at place in many levels of education, albeit with a different focus and frame of comparison. We see district standards, state standards, and even attempts to nationalize standards. So what are standards? As stated, standards are usually broad descriptions of what students should know and be able to do. In this way, they describe important skills and knowledge. They usually fall into one of two categories. A content standard focuses on the what, while a performance standard describes the how, a level at which a student must demonstrate competency. Theoretically, standards are supposed to play a role in guiding the creation of curriculum, which should flesh out the standards with a specific scope and sequence, and should identify the materials and experiences involved in the educational plan. In the U.S., local and state standards are common, while our history of federalism and local control means we have resisted most attempts to nationalize curriculum and standards, which is not true of all other countries. Many do feature a national curriculum. It is not difficult to imagine the tensions and debates that arise surrounding standards. Should we and can we really expect all students to meet the same standards when opportunities to learn can differ so much? Should standards describe a minimum level of competency, or should they be aspirational and hard to achieve? And who gets to create standards? While standards have always been around, we saw the beginning of what people generally call the standards period in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Presidents George H.W. Bush and Clinton convened governors and legislators to attempt to define core subjects and create standards and national assessments. This effort, eventually known as Goals 2000, led to the creation of the first national arts standards, with music education drafting a set of 9 content standards and accompanying performance standards in 1994. But ultimately, concerns over federal overreach prompted this effort to dissolve, with only a few content areas finishing standards and very little work done on national assessments. More recently, the Common Core state standards in math and English language arts and the next generation science standards have come onto the scene. Despite their now widespread adoption, many concerns about the content and adoption of the standards has dominated the conversation surrounding their uptake. In the arts, teams of educators came together for a wholesale revision to the national standards, releasing the newly minted National Core Arts Standards in 2014. While a discussion of these standards is beyond the scope of this video, they somewhat mirror the structure and tone of the Common Core state standards while focusing on artistic process and artistic literacy more than music products. It is important to remember that national music standards, both the 1994 and 2014 iterations, are voluntary, and each state ultimately designs and adopts its own standards, making for a complex map of music education across the country.